So, welcome everyone to this month's episode of Digging In with Teaching with Primary Sources at MTSU. We're very excited to have you guys join us today. Just a couple quick reminders. Again, we are recording this for our YouTube channel, so please do keep your mics muted. And if you would, make sure that you're rename sourcing your first and last name if you're joining us live. And of course, remember that we do want this to be interactive, so make use of that chat box, the reaction buttons, and we'll do a polling question in here as well. And as always, we do have a Padlet for this series, and so you can find all the links to the PowerPoints, resources, and such that we will be sharing today at that Padlet. So I'm going to turn things over to Stacy, who is going to introduce our topic for this month.
Thank you. The topic that we chose is scientific advancements. And we have done pieces before on different kind of technology, how it evolves through history, and we have some lesson plans, and we've done other things in some newsletters over the years along those topics, but it's been a while. And we wanted to think about scientific advancements in kind of broader way than just sticking to things like technology. So while we do have a lot of technology focus in our newsletter, we also wanted to expand that idea a bit more. I'm going to share my screen for just a few minutes. So if you haven't seen already our newsletter for this month, this is what it looks like. And so if you think about science and technology, of course, you can think about a lot of scientific advancements, a lot that are specifically named in the standards, but there are a lot of them that you can still teach social studies with, as well as, work in actual science standards too. So there are some things that are just like more about social change and the connection between, advancements in science and what that actually does for our culture and society, as opposed to kind of more economic and mechanistic things. I linked from the science and technology to the science reference services page. This is an old school page at the Library of Congress. They have one of these for each of their different kind of reading rooms. And so you are able to find some of the links here that we also have elsewhere on the newsletter itself. So if you do teach science, or you have a colleague that teaches science, you can find some things here. It's a good crossover. But if it's not like a place where you can go and just, sort through primary sources. To do that, you can just go to the Library of Congress homepage. And if you go to digital collections, and if we can do a subject search for digital collections on science, let me show you how to do that. So here's the subjects over here. And if we click on more subjects, you'll see all these different, they actually have a lot. And I don't really like these lists that they do because they're not in alphabetical order, but science and technology is right here. So if you click on that, they have listed 23 different primary source collections that are digitized that have to do with science and technology. So you can see the birth of the recording industry with Emil Berliner papers. He's the person who invented the gramophone. The Carl Sagan collection, the conservation movement, if you want to talk about the environmental history. And two different collections that use Thomas Edison, early motion pictures, origins of American animation, Samuel Morse, and a couple of the Wright brothers collections as well. Their papers, their family papers, as well as photographs of first flight. So that's a good place to go to find science-related primary sources. I want to open up to you a question. We wanted to make this open-ended, so it's not a poll. If you would just drop in the chat box what you think the most important scientific advancements are in American history.
So we've got computer, internet. I was definitely thinking the computer, flight, or vaccines. Also,
Mm-hmm.
good choices.
Yes. Oh, what? How would we teach these days without computer and the internet, right?
Yeah, dishwasher. Yes, I'm a big fan of my dishwasher.
Oh, dishwasher. Yes, you're right. There are all those like home convenience type technologies too that have a really awesome kind of tie over with our socioeconomic lives, that may not seem historical, but there's a lot of really good kind of um, primary sources of the Library of Congress that talk about consumerism of the early 20th century. You can find ads for those kinds of things. And of course, within the Chronicling America newspaper collection, you can find a lot of ads for new appliances. And so your kids do need to think about that as technology that impacts the way that we live as Americans. Vaccine, very good one. We're actually going to hear more about the history of the vaccine a little bit later today. And so we have, you know, we have a lesson idea on Johannes Gutenberg for those 7th grade teachers out there. The printing press, one of my favorite scientific advancements. We have one on Nikola Tesla that we're going to feature in a few minutes. He's so interesting. The smallpox vaccine that October is going to talk about shortly. The first cotton mill in America was Slater Mill in Massachusetts. No, yes, I did this one. How is it that I'm not remembering? It's in Rhode Island. Pardon me, my bad. And then we have 4 additional ones. As always, on page 4, the little bit of physics, a little bit of aerospace engineering, a little bit of hydroelectric power, and the first Bell telephone. I actually showed that picture to my 3rd grader, and she had no idea that a telephone could ever look like that ever. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing and turn this back over to Kira, so we can hear more about Nikola Tesla.
All right, so let me bring up my Tesla PowerPoint here. So I have to say before I start this, I didn't know tons about him before we started. I mentioned to my brother this morning that I was going to be doing something on Tesla today, and he got super excited and spent like 15 minutes telling me how great Tesla was. So I was like, you should just do this for me. So yeah, today's what our first featured activity for today is Nikola Tesla and electricity. So what I would like to start with actually is a polling question. Let's see here. So let me launch the poll here. So what modern devices and technology derive from Tesla's invention and research? And you guys can pick more than one. So our options for those of you who will be seeing this later on YouTube are the alternative current, radio, remote controls, cell phones, wireless technology, neon signs, X-ray technology, and radar technology. I'll give you guys a few seconds here to lock in your answers. All right, we'll stop there. All right, so the actual correct answer here is all of the above. He actually influenced all of these. On most of these, I think you guys picked like a couple of each, but yeah, it's actually all of the above, which is amazing to think about because, like I said, I didn't know tons about Tesla. I don't remember learning about him when I was, in elementary school, middle school, or high school. So I don't know if that he just wasn't in the curriculum then, or what. But yeah, Nikola Tesla. So exactly who is he? He was born in what is now modern day Croatia. He was Serbian. He was born in 1856. As a student, he studied engineering and physics. Although he did receive his college degree, he actually had a bit of a gambling problem. So lost all of his tuition money, and then basically kind of hid out from his family for a while because he was ashamed that he lost all of his money. Years later, he goes to Paris. He works for a telephone company in Hungary for a little while, but then he winds up in Paris working for the Continental Edison Company in the early 1880s. And while he is there, he works on initially on installing indoor incandescent lighting. So this is still a real kind of new industry. But his managers quickly notice that he's really good at engineering. So they kind of pull him from that work and begin to ask him to work on designing and kind of working out issues with improving the generating dynamos and the motors that they were using. And in fact, he's so good at this that they start sending him to other locations for the company and to troubleshoot engineering problems throughout France and Germany. One of his managers sort of kind of gets headhunted to come to New York City to work with the Edison Machine Works Company, and he convinces Tesla to come along with him and convinces the Edison Company to pay for that. So he immigrates to New York, to the US in 1884. Years later, he would become a naturalized citizen. So when he first gets to New York, he's working for the Edison Machine Works Company. And from what I've been able to, to find, it seems like there's a bit of debate about how much interaction he actually had with Thomas Edison. Um, but he worked for the Edison Machine Works Company for about 6 months. And it seems that there was some debate over and some dispute over pay. He thought he was owed some bonuses. The company didn't agree. So he winds up leaving the Edison Machine Works Company after about 6 months and starts looking for investors essentially to start his own company. So with the idea, he'd been working on this arc lighting system for the Edison Company. So he takes kind of that idea and then this idea he'd been having for this alternating current motor. And so he starts working on developing those. And by 1887, he has developed the alternating current induction motor, which allows for high voltage electricity that would be able to travel farther than the direct current system that Edison had. A year later, he meets up with George Westinghouse, and who, of course, is the owner of the Westinghouse Electric and Manufacturing Company, and is able to license his product with Westinghouse. So he licensed that alternating current motor. And then Westinghouse hires Tesla to join the company, kind of as a consultant, to help set up a system set up a system to power streetcars in Pittsburgh. So Tesla starts that work, which is pretty lucrative. He's got a great contract going with Westinghouse. So at the same time that all of this is happening, we have what's kind of called the War of the Currents. There were essentially three big companies that were vying to kind of corner the market on basically being able to like electrify the country. So you had Westinghouse, you had Edison, and then there was another guy, and I don't remember his name right off. Eventually, the other guy at Edison, their companies merge and that becomes General Electric. But the idea here is, and the debate was trying to be able to, corner the money that was available to finance the research and development for this. And so Edison actually starts a propaganda campaign to try to say that the alternating current is dangerous. And so that's why that you should stick with his direct current system, that the Westinghouse and what Tesla was doing was very, very dangerous. And in fact goes as far to, he played a role in an execution that happened where he set up basically an electric chair using alternating current to show again the dangers of alternating current. By 1893, though, Westinghouse and his engineers had created an efficient version of Tesla's induction motor. And so at that point, they start trying to bid out to get the bid to do the lighting for the World's Columbian Exposition there. And Westinghouse gets that bid. And so actually the image that you're seeing here is from that event. This was a huge deal because they were able actually with this event to be able to show that the alternating current system was safe, it was reliable, and it could be efficient. And that really would move them forward in the current wars. Around the same time, Tesla meets up with Edward Dean Adams. and he asked Tesla for advice on how best to set up a system to generate power at Niagara Falls, because he had been working on building and setting up a new generator there. So Tesla, gives him some advice, and of course plugs his own product. And so there is a contract that occurs between the Westinghouse company and this new power plant that's going to be developed at Niagara Falls, and that actually becomes the Edward Dean Adams power plant. It's built in 1895, and it is the first modern hydroelectric power plant. And they actually, when they first built it here, it was built using a two-phase alternating current generating system, which again is using Tesla's technology. So this power plant, again, is the first modern hydroelectric power plant, and they could transmit commercial electricity over large distances. And so this was able to power all of the industry in the region, as well as to provide electrical power to the city of Buffalo. So again, this is a really big deal in kind of moving us forward and thinking about how we're going to electrify industry and cities. So for this lesson idea, because again, I don't know how much your students' background they'll have on Tesla. I did provide a link in the lesson idea for a little brain pop video that you could use. That's real cute, and it's got some good information in it that'll give them some background. And then the sources in this lesson idea, part of them come from the Edward Dean Adams power plant from its HABS record. This site is on the National Register. And within the HABS record, there are some great illustrations that you can use to kind of show the design for these generators. So we're going to look at some of these. They're going to look at the four that we've included in the lesson idea. So this first one here, again, kind of giving you a big scale view of kind of how this is situated along the river. So you'll note here, of course, we've got the Niagara River, the direction of where the falls is at, this dredged channel, and then the inlet canal. So we're kind of diverting water in this way. We have the two powerhouses. So this was, of course, powerhouse number one. This one was built a little later. And then this right here is the transformer house. So we can see here, again, this is going to be kind of the center part of what we're going to look at in the next few. So you'll notice this part right here. So again, this right here will just kind of help orient your students to again how this site is set up. So the next one, again, we see the powerhouse number one, and we can see, the generator motors that are here, where each one of those are at, the bridge, and the transformer house. And we see the canal, and here's the main tunnel. So we can kind of see again how this site is situated. Now, this one right here, I think is probably the most interesting of the four. And I don't pretend to understand the specifics of how hydroelectric power works. So, just keep that in mind. But what is really cool about this, you'll see here, it's got a good key to show you the different pieces that are being highlighted on this diagram. So we have one here, this is the walls for the powerhouse. This is the floor. 3, this is the water level. So the water that's coming in there from the inlet canal, this is where that comes in at. And you see there's kind of a little like door or gate area here that kind of blocks that we could open that and then allow the water to come in. It comes down this way. And then there's another piece here that is called the penstock, which lets water into where the turbines are at. And then here are some support levers that are here for just, again, kind of working that area. And then we've got the two upper and lower wheels that, again, that are turning the turbines. We have another gate here, and this is where the water is then kind of released, and it goes out through what is called the main discharge tunnel. This right here is the flywheel, and then we have the tubular shaft. So here's the part that's actually turning. And then here we have, this is helping to support the weight of what is being turned. Right up here at 12, we have the governor that's controlling the speed at which all of this is moving. And you see here from 12, this line here, 13, this is the support that runs from that governor back down to where the water is coming in. So again, it kind of gives you the specifics, and I think that this will really kind of help students to kind of understand how the system works. And then the final illustration kind of gives that in a bit more detail, so we can kind of see kind of a bit more of a detailed drawing there for that one. So again, you could have students look at this and kind of begin to kind of think about how this is working, and then how then they're implementing what the generator is and how that works with the hydroelectric power. Now, after you've had a chance to go through and look at these drawings and kind of have students analyze them a bit, then you can introduce this excerpt from an article. This is from a newspaper, and it's the Times, and I forget the exact city that it's published in right off. But it was in 1894 that this article was published. So I'm going to read this loud. Go back to trying to move my boxes here so I can see. All right, so I'm going to read this loud in case it's a little bit difficult for you to see the text. It says, his latest achievements. The most important work in which, sorry, there's a green bar over part of this I can't see. The most important work on which Tesla is now engaged, and which bids fair to bring him more fame than anything he has done before this, is the machine by which a heretofore unheard of steam pressure can be applied to the generation of electricity, reducing the waste of the current, and what is of supreme importance, reducing the cost of electricity. It is easy to see that any device by which the cost of electric power is brought below the cost of steam power will bring a revolution in the process of manufacturing more sudden and startling than was brought about by the introduction of steam. The economical transmission of electricity generated by water power, as at Niagara Falls, has already brought a promise of this revolution. And if Mr. Tesla's machine will bring a corresponding reduction in the cost of electricity to cities too far away to derive benefit from water power, like that at Niagara, then indeed the revolution will be complete. Electric motors will everywhere take the place of costly and wasteful shafting in mills and factories, and the day when private houses will be lighted, heated, and to some extent run by electricity will be brought almost, and again, the little bar's in my way again, almost as, and I can't see the lines, cities as it is
Near to
now.
other cities.
Okay, yeah, there's a line right over those words.
Yeah.
Is now to Buffalo, which will receive its first installment of power from Niagara Falls in a few weeks at a price promised to be somewhere near a fourth cheaper than what is now paid for the work done by steam. This much may be said positively, and the statement is here made to the public for the first time. If the wonderful machine on which Mr. Tesla is now putting the finishing touches works as well elsewhere as it has already worked in the Tesla laboratory, it will bring the extraordinary advantages suggested above. The inventor himself refuses to make any definite statements as to what his engine will do. I know, he says, what it will accomplish in my laboratory. It will accomplish in my laboratory results that cannot but be considered important, and that certainly open up a new field for high pressure boilers. It is now in operation and has succeeded absolutely. But of course, I must not predict from laboratory results what a machine will accomplish when applied to public uses. It may take 2 or 3 years to prepare for placing it on the market. I have, of course, a pretty definite idea as to what the reduction it will make in the cost of electricity, but there are many reasons why it would not be well to give the figures. So what are some things that stand out to you guys from that excerpt from that article?
Okay, I just have to start off this by saying that their little comment about how it was more important that this was cheap than that it was not wasteful. I mean, isn't that just Americans, like capital society in a nutshell? Cheaper is better than anything else.
Yeah, cheap and efficient, but cheap being number one. So what are some other things that stand out to you guys in that passage there?
I can't type fast enough to respond, but I was going to say where it talks about the reduction in the cost of electricity to cities too far away. It just made me think about how relevant this topic is because of what happened in Texas and how the electric bills have gone up. So I think it would be a good current event connection.
Yeah.
To say that that's been an issue for a while, talking about how can we provide electricity at the lowest cost.
Right. Yeah. And then again, also understanding that the way the systems are set up are not uniform across the country. Because of course, the way Texas has their system set up is very different than everywhere else. And just like here, what he's saying is that system at, that's being set up at Niagara Falls is going to be different than what can be set up at places that, aren't close to, large amounts of water. One of the other things that stood out to me in this passage is towards the end when he's talking essentially about the scientific process, right? He's saying that in his lab, that his new machine works, and it's very clear that within their laboratory testing and the research testing that it is definitely working, but that they could not promise that those same results would apply once you took it to kind of mass market use. And I think that that's a really cool point to bring out to students because, again, that's just part of the scientific process that still happens, right? We test things out in small, small groups, small controlled environments. And then as we move it closer to where we can kind of mass produce it, there are usually a lot of bugs that have to be worked out. I mean, think about it. We've seen electric cars, kind of prototypes for those for probably 10, 15, 20 years. But it's just now getting to where we see those mass produced. So I think that that's a really cool point to bring out to students in this. This article is a really long piece, so if you wanted to pull out other excerpts, there's some really good ones in there. In fact, he's got a passage toward the end where he talks about the importance of essentially finding renewable and alternative energy sources, because he makes the point about, with the steam, like we're only going to have so much wood and coal to burn before we run out. So we're going to have to find other means of, of fueling electrification. So again, that's another really interesting point that I thought was fascinating in this piece. So the question that I would hope you would leave students with is thinking about how did Tesla's work advance electrification during the early 20th century? So, and again, I think as you get into the story and kind of learning more about alternating current and the motor that he developed and really how it's still in use today, it becomes very clear that Tesla is central to the story of electrification. And again, I'm fascinated that we don't know his name quite as much as we know Edison, and that again is just very interesting. And if you happen to get a chance to visit the Niagara Falls area, there is a fabulous statue to Tesla that is pictured here. I went back and pulled some of my pictures from a trip there several years ago. So again, that is a good place to go visit and kind of learn a little bit more about him and his work. So hopefully, again, this will kind of whet your appetite and see that there's a lot of cool things that I think students will really get into with Tesla and some of his research. All right, did we have any questions? All right, well, why don't I go ahead and turn it over to October, who's going to talk to us about the smallpox vaccine.
Yeah, thank you, Kira. And that was really interesting. I feel kind of stupid because I don't know anything about Tesla besides the car. And I know he didn't make or invent the car. I was just like, oh, they named it after some cool scientist, but I never thought to look him up. So that was really cool to learn about him today. Let me go ahead and share my screen. All right, so I'm going to talk to y'all about the forgotten history of the smallpox vaccine. So what we normally, if you guys ever teach smallpox, might learn about the vaccine is Edward Jenner. So Edward Jenner was an English physician and scientist. And he was considered the scientist who pioneered the concept of vaccines. So the very first vaccine was the smallpox vaccine created by Edward Jenner. He was a zoologist and a medical doctor. And so the first smallpox vaccine was actually a cowpox vaccine in the sense that he noticed people who were infected with cowpox couldn't get smallpox, and cowpox was a lot less deadly. And so he created the vaccine around cowpox and infected people with cowpox. And then they were immune to smallpox, which is really interesting. And of course, just him being a zoologist kind of gave him that perspective in a way other scientists didn't notice before. And it was a really important vaccine because smallpox at the time of Edward Jenner killed 10% of the population. So 1 out of 10 people died of smallpox, and therefore it was something very prevalent. Numbers could get as high as 20% of people dying from smallpox in smaller towns where it could spread a lot more easily and efficiently. And so smallpox was a really big disease that would have major outbreaks every couple of years and was hard to control because besides virilation, which we're going to learn about later, the most people could do was quarantine you and try to keep that all together. And as we can probably see from this pandemic, quarantine doesn't always work. So it was really difficult before the smallpox vaccine to control smallpox. And because of his work on the smallpox vaccine, Edward Jenner was actually appointed the physician extraordinaire to King George IV in 1821. So he became a really big name in medicine and in just the science world in general. And so big, oh, and this is also a newsletter. I just wanted to include this newspaper because I thought that it would be a really good way to give your kids background while also looking at a secondary source. This is from a newspaper made in the 1930s that's available in the Library of Congress, and it's included in the lesson idea on the newsletter. But he was so big that he got a letter from Thomas Jefferson. So this is the primary source that if you wanted to teach this to your students, you could use in your classrooms. And it was a very interesting letter to happen upon. And I'm just going to read it aloud for you because that's hard to read. And luckily, Dr. Graham was able to find you guys a transcription for the letter that's included on the newsletter. So you won't have to have your students transcribe this. But it says, "Sir, I have received a copy of the evidence at large respecting the discovery of the vaccine inoculation, which you have been pleased to send me, and for which I return you my thanks. Having been among the early converts in this part of the globe to its efficiency, I took an early part in recommending it to my countrymen. I avail myself of this occasion of rendering you a portion of the tribute of gratitude due to you from the whole human family. Medicine has never before produced any single improvement of such utility. Harvey's discovery of the circulation of the blood was a beautiful addition to our knowledge of the animal economy, but on a review of the practice of medicine before and since that epoch, I do not see any great amelioration which has been derived from that discovery. You have erased from the calendar of human afflictions one of its greatest. Yours is the comfortable reflection that mankind can never forget that you have lived. Future nations will know by history only that the lonesome smallpox has existed and by you has been extirpated. Accept my fervent wishes for your health and happiness and assurances of the greatest respect and consideration, Thomas Jefferson." Really powerful letter. That must have been really cool to receive that from Thomas Jefferson, a really big name in the scientific revolution. So that's a really interesting letter to go through your students. And I don't know if you guys are already chatting about this because I can't see it, but what does this say about Thomas Jefferson's view of smallpox and of Edward Jenner and Edward Jenner's popularity in the science community? That's something you guys can put in the chat, and hopefully someone will read it out to me, your responses, and anything that just pops out to you in this letter.
So some things that people have pointed out, it being the biggest threat and then the savior sort of the human race. And I had noted the sentence about, you have erased from the calendar of human affliction one of its greatest. That's just an amazing sentence. It is noted, of course, with Thomas Jefferson's varied interest in science, the fact that he's saying that this is one of the most important is definitely it's a big statement coming from him.
I also like his kind of comment about immortality, like you will forever be known about this, and that's such an important thing, is to be known for something important, so that kind of the great man thing.
Yeah, to piggyback off of that, so many of our students want to be famous, but they associate it with sports or the music industry. even though they know famous scientists and they can name a lot of them, I don't think they think of themselves as being famous or making a name for themselves that way. So that would be a good thing to point out with making that connection for STEM.
Yeah, well, maybe your students can be inspired by Dr. Anthony Fauci, who's the rock star of the nation now.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you can definitely tell Thomas Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence. It's very, I don't know, I would not expect a letter like this, even for this time period. Like a letter like this seems very extravagant. My favorite line was the medicine has never before produced any single improvement of such utility. And comparing it to like, oh, well, we learned about the circulation of blood, but this is so much better. Like, can you how did you do that? And it was really cool reading this letter when I found it. So yeah, absolutely. A perfect letter to dive into with your students. I think another fun activity would be, there's a lot of words in here that even I don't know. So I'm sure your students wouldn't know. So to have them go through it, underline the letter, maybe if you have time, rewrite it in common language, like how would this letter might look like today, in their vocabulary in a way that they better understand. And that can also be kind of like an English standard as well. So, but where did Edward Jenner get this idea from? And that's where the forgotten history, although I'm sure not a lot of people know about Edward Jenner too, because I also didn't know a lot about him, but he got the idea from someone that's even more forgotten than Edward Jenner. And so Onesimus is a slave from Africa who was brought to the United States. And he told his master at the time, Cotton Mather, around 1716 about this tradition of variolation. So in Africa and other Asian countries, it was common for people to avoid getting smallpox because smallpox was big in Africa and it usually traveled in slave ships and killed a lot of the enslaved on their way here to the North Americas. And so it was common for people in Africa and Asian countries to get treated through variolation. So that process was infecting people with a milder vein of smallpox, not cowpox, but infecting them with a smaller, less deadly part of smallpox. And if you were to survive that, which most people did, variolation did kill people, but at a less rate than getting that smallpox naturally did. If you survived getting that less deadly strain of smallpox, wow, how am I speaking today? A less deadly strain of smallpox, then you were less likely to get smallpox in the future. It was very highly unlikely that you would get smallpox in an infected way. And so this was something that they did a lot in Eastern countries, and Onesimus told Cotton Mather about it, which you may have heard that name before. He was actually very popular in the witch trials. Just a little interesting to go from trying to kill witches one century to pushing science in the next century. But that's what he did because he was fascinated by this process, did a lot of researching and reading about it after he was told by his slave about it, and started to promote it into Boston doctors because Boston was having an outbreak of smallpox at the time and started in 1721. And so he started telling Boston doctors about this West African tradition. And a lot of people thought he was crazy. A lot of people thought that he was insane, especially with him being a priest. A lot of people thought he was going against God because some religious traditions believe that, you know, if you were afflicted by something, then that was God's work. And so they're like, what are you doing? People who are dying of smallpox are supposed to be dying of smallpox, and then trying to promote it in science communities apart from trying to promote it in religious communities. Scientists thought this was super dangerous, that he was just trying to kill people because how could you get infected with smallpox and not die? Especially if it was killing so many people at high rates. And so a lot of people just kind of rubbed him off until Dr. Zebediah Balston, tricky but cool name. He was one of the few doctors to actually believe that cotton mather and variolation could work. And so he practiced it on his son and his enslaved first, which is an entirely different conversation you can have with your students about just medical practices and things, because his son was only 11 and his enslaved probably couldn't say no. So that's a whole other tricky thing. But he practiced it on those couple of people first and then brought it to his patients. And he actually had to give it to his patients in secret because he got arrested for practicing variolation. Since so many doctors didn't believe in it, a lot of people thought it would just end up killing more people and spreading smallpox faster. So he was arrested and jailed, and he was eventually let out if he promised never to do it again. And he really just kept doing it in secret. So he had to go to patients' houses in the middle of the night, and his patients did agree to it if they believed in the science of it. And so he was able to inoculate 248 patients. And after his experimentation, he wrote a book, which is kind of weird, kind of just confessing to your crimes. But he wrote a book about how the people that he experimented on, only 1 of 40 people passed away from variolation, compared to the 1 of 7 people who were dying of smallpox when they naturally caught it during this epidemic in the 1720s. So after this book was published, more and more doctors started to practice inoculation, and Boston actually was able to stop their epidemic of smallpox in Boston due to this trend of variolation. And this variolation trend would then 100 years later inspire Edward Jenner to create the vaccine, because he himself was inoculated as a child, and it actually caused him health issues because, again, variolation isn't perfect. So he wanted to find a better way to beat smallpox. So he used the variolation that he received as a child and the science behind it to then create the first smallpox vaccine. So it's not commonly taught that we would have no idea about vaccinations or that type of science without an enslaved person from Africa who gave Cotton Mather the idea and spread his tradition. And it makes you wonder, this is a question you can ask to your students, how much of our science or art or anything in our society can be inspired by Eastern countries or, Africa, Asian countries who are not necessarily always seen as things that have inspired our culture and our medicine and our practices. Obviously they have, and that's a question you can always bring up to your students when explaining the story to them. So yeah, that was my lesson idea. I don't know if there's any questions. I can answer as best as possible.
There was one question, October. I wasn't sure of the answer, so I might have been wrong, but was this early vaccine, the variolation, did it use live virus? I mean, they did just kind of smear it into somebody's open wound, right?
Yes, they did.
So it was, yeah, no needles yet.
No needles yet.
It was pretty much just a contamination issue. But I mean, think about the risks you have to take, and how many doctors tried stuff like this that did not work. So yeah. Man, this
and
is
what was the year?
Oh yeah, what's the
year on which one?
On Jenner.
The year on Jenner is so he created the first smallpox vaccine in 1796.
Wow. Okay. But we only eradicated smallpox in the 1900s. That's interesting, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, thank you, October. We're going to come back to that in a moment with one more resource. But before that, we have some resources that we want to highlight, and Layla's going to handle that for us.
Yeah, hi guys. Thanks for joining us. I know we're close to spring break for some of us and maybe not for others, but I appreciate you coming and joining us today. I'm going to be just sharing a few resources with you. Can you hear me? Okay. Okay, cool. I moved inside. I didn't want the cars rushing by to be an issue on my porch. So I'm just going to share a few resources with you. And a lot of these are not necessarily featured in the newsletter. So I have a link for you guys. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you all. So you can see, this is on our Padlet. That way you know where to find it. Whoops, sorry, my share my screen option. I think it's a user error, not my fault, or not the computer's fault, but we do have on the Padlet a list of these links. It's just a PDF with like 5 links on it for you to access later. So I'm gonna share my screen with you guys. So this is our newsletter, and this is linked in our Padlet, but also on that link of, or that PDF of links that I put on the Padlet for you guys. The newsletter is linked there too, so you can just have an easy way to get to it. So this is on our website, of course, our newsletter. And on our newsletter, we've linked a few important links here. So some primary source sets, some lesson plans as well. And most of you all are familiar with our workshop, so I'm not going to really walk you through all of that. But if you just go to our web page here, you go to lesson plans. They're organized in chronological order under their little theme tabs, where you can find those. And then we also have our primary source sets here. Some of those links were from TPS and some were from the Library of Congress. So they're all hyperlinked there for you to go through at your leisure. So one thing that I wanted to share with you guys, another fun thing, Dr. Graham kind of introduced it to you guys earlier, is the Science Reference Services, this page right here. I think this page is really interesting. The website is just loc.gov/rr/SciTech, and it's linked on that Padlet PDF as well. There are lots of different topics here you can choose from. I went to the research guides by subject. So much here, and then the for students and teachers. This has a lot of great like external resources you can pull from. I noticed when I was going through, some of the hyperlinks no longer work, but a lot of them do. So don't let that discourage you if you hit like the first one and it no longer works, because most of them do. One thing that I really liked is the PBS resource. Let me see if I can find it. Resources for teachers. And here it is, PBS Teachers and STEM Education Resources Center. So when you go to this website here, I'm going to kind of veer off for you guys for a second. You can browse by subject. And I also found these awesome Trailblazer Bio Cars that I think are super cool. And you could have your students make something like this for scientists, for inventors, for innovation. You could use these as a framework. So I love these. I think there's one, I thought there was one for an inventor, but you can make your students kind of mirror these as well. These are great resources, and that's available through that research Guides for Science and Technology, just on that PDF hyperlink there. The other thing I wanted to share with you guys, I love the teaching blogs. So the Library of Congress teacher blogs, or teaching with the Library of Congress, is just this right here. You can go and see all of these different subject guides. I am going to show you guys the science, technology, and math guide, because that really connects to our subject, I guess, because that connects to what we're talking about today. So a few that I immediately looked at earlier this week in this like science, math, and technology, or technology, math, excuse me, were directly related to science literacy, disease control, and citizenship. So I thought this was really interesting to see they're connecting these resources here. If you scroll down, infectious diseases, science literacy, and citizen behavior. So you're looking at historic newspaper articles and kind of analyzing how, there's one about measles here, measles make mothers mourn, how they're really using these newspaper articles in the 20th century to make people feel like they have an obligation to be aware when it comes to disease control. It's their science literacy and citizenship. So these are really interesting, and I like that they have hyperlinks and comments here that you can go directly to the images. These have the Chronicling America articles linked right here, so you can go to that. There's another two that I wanted to share with you guys on this same tab. Discovering mathematical qualities in primary sources from the 1918 flu pandemic. How cool is this to make a cross-curricular connection? And look at these charts. So you look at these newspaper articles and then you look at these charts of diseases and disease control and really bring in these primary sources to make connections about the graph and the article, like what were your initial thoughts on both and how do they connect, and really bringing in those subjects together, because who doesn't love a cross-curricular connection? So that's a fantastic article too. And these are all really new. These are January 2021. So brand new things that are being produced. And the last thing I wanted to share with you guys on this, I want to do a science experiment with this one. Science literacy and history, comparing masks from 1918 and today. I want to see how we can, this is something I would love to do at home, but I'm sure my neighbors would think there's something wrong. Do some kind of masking experiment where we recreate those goggles. I was listening to something recently where they would have like holes in their masks so they could smoke in 1918. So you could have students kind of look at these differences in our masks today and the masks from 1918 and the materials that were used, gauze masks, now the style. We can see so many connections to our society today. And every student will have a personal connection or experience with these articles. So that's why I wanted to share these with you specifically from the teaching blog and how they related to science literacy and like citizenship, whether it's digital or like reading the newspaper citizenship, however they get their news today. So those are 3 articles that I wanted to share from, or 3 blog articles that I wanted to share from teaching with the Library of Congress. The other thing I wanted to share, if you've attended our webinars in the past, you know I love a good Chronicling America source. I'm obsessed. I love Chronicling America. I love looking at these newspaper articles. So I like to go to the topics in Chronicling America and then look at them in alphabetical order. That's where I am now. So I know if there's something I'm looking for, if I'm just browsing for fun, because who doesn't do that, right? I can figure out what I want to look at. So this is a great resource because you can get a better idea of the source material available. A lot of these topics include keywords and timelines and ways to research and get those better search terms so you get a better result. This is something that can really help students build their research skills when they're looking at these topics. And there's so many relevant topics to scientific advancements. There is a topic in Chronicling America section for X-rays, for the Wright brothers. There's one on motorcycle mania and how the motorcycle has improved over time. There's one on Nikola Tesla, so go straight along with our lesson idea for today. Civil War ballooning, disease and disease control, building the Titanic, the theory of evolution, early cars in America. So all these different pieces that your students can have some connection to and that our standards will definitely be connected to no matter what you teach. I just wanted to show you guys one, the building the Titanic one I thought was really cool. When you scroll down, there it is, building the Titanic. So this has some maps of the architectural process of building the Titanic. It has a timeline here for students so they can kind of gauge their search, like bring it down just a little bit. And then the read more about it here has these selected articles already here for students. And you can click on these and have fantastic resources already available. And it's going to have these words highlighted from that search in red. So students can just kind of zoom in, see what they're looking for, and pull it around. So very, like I said, a very wide amount, so many categories that you can choose from this. This is just based off of the Titanic. So all of these articles would talk about the science and technology behind building the Titanic. So again, all of those resources there. And then the last thing I wanted to share with you guys, we highlighted this in our page 4 for one of our lesson ideas in a newsletter a while back. And then in this newsletter, the telephone was actually from this everyday mystery. So these are just fun facts from the Library of Congress. Somebody asks a question, and then the Library of Congress creates an article with an answer. You can go down and you see they have featured mysteries here, but I like that they're categorized too. So if you're looking for something specifically, you can go to technology, since we're talking about scientific advancements today. And you can see here's that telephone one from our page 4 of our newsletter. Who's credited with inventing the telephone? And students can look at these drawings that are linked from the Library of Congress. Hello. They can look at these different resources available to them and really analyze how Bell, excuse me, my brain isn't working, created the telephone, how that first telephone looked, how it was used. Like Dr. Grimm said, her daughter didn't realize telephones looked like this. I'm sure your students probably wouldn't understand this at first either. So great articles here and great images that your students can look for and choose from. There's another one here about who invented frozen food, because I know everybody's at least eaten frozen food once in America, probably. So frozen food, who invented it, how the early refrigerators worked and deep freezes. So this is something that you can really share with your students if they have a question like, who invented Christmas lights, or how did we get frozen food, or how do we get the toothbrush, things like that. Send them here because they're going to find articles and resources. It'll be a fun, investigative class activity. So I think that's all I had to share with you guys. And like I said, all of these are linked on the Padlet in that PDF. You can go and just kind of play around with them. So I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. Graham because she wanted to share a few more resources with you guys.
Thanks, Layla. This isn't really a resource as much as something cool I saw today that I wanted to share with y'all. And I was scrolling through Twitter, as one does, and one of the institutions that I follow is the Beinecke Library, which is the rare books and manuscripts library at Yale. And so earlier, actually this is yesterday, but I didn't see it till today. They posted these pages from this book by Cotton Mather talking about the smallpox vaccination. And I didn't even know he was connected to that at all until I read October's lesson idea. So I was like, oh my gosh, we're going to be talking about that today. And so basically he's writing this, basically telling people, if it works and science says it works and everyone else says it works, why don't you get vaccinated? Which of course we've heard a lot of over the past year. And so I really just wanted to show you guys a couple, hold on, let me see if I can, okay, there we go. My box was covering my arrow. Okay, so down here, I just want to read a few sentences and then I won't get too carried away here, hopefully. But he says, and we have an army of Africans among ourselves who have themselves been under it and given us all the assurance which a rational mind can desire that it has long been used with the like success in Africa. So he's alluding to Onesimus here. Of course, I don't see that he used his specific name at all in this work, but he's definitely alluding to his own enslaved person, Onesimus. Yea, behold, ye yourselves have seen it. The operation has been performed on 100 and more in the town of Boston, and not one of them has miscarried. They have every one of them hitherto done well. They all give thanks to our merciful Redeemer for leading them into it. They would every one of them rather undergo it again and many times over than suffer the smallpox, as people ordinarily suffer it in the common way of infection. So, and in the way of Cotton Mather, he just goes on and on and on like that. I wish there were a link that I could send to you, but unfortunately, the link that they have here is just to their library record. I have a feeling you have to be in the library and call up this book to get those pages. But if anyone wants to have copies of those pages without having to follow them on Twitter, just let me know and I'd be happy to like do some screenshots or something for you. Anyway, I just thought that was really cool. And so I wanted to share it with everybody. And now I'm going to send it back to Kira.
All right, so now are your time to wrap up. And so we are at the fun part of this. And I'm actually going to let October share her screen because we are going to give away a book to one of our folks who are participating live. So today we are giving away Lies My Teacher Told Me, the Young Readers Edition. And let's see who the winner is. Rosa. So Rosa, if you will drop, you can send us your mailing address. We'll get that in the mail to you. And just a reminder, of course, here is again the address for our Padlet. Again, you can use that QR code to get there. And that is where you can find the PowerPoints that we've shared today and the resources that were mentioned. We've already gave away a book. And then, of course, also, if you will take a minute to fill out our feedback form, we would really appreciate that. It does really help us going forward. We will be back next month. We are going to be doing our session on April the 8th. And our topic next month is Tennessee literature. So again, if that's something that you're interested in, definitely go ahead and sign up for that. We are going to have some guests with us from Nashville sites. talking about some virtual walking tours that they are developing that will tie into our topic of Tennessee literature. And also, we are going to be piloting a new program later this spring with our partners at the East Tennessee Historical Society. It's going to be a watch party. We are going to be using Zoom to watch at least 3 episodes from the new docuseries Amend on the 14th Amendment. And so if that is something that you're interested in, we'll be watching it, kind of commenting while we're watching it via chat box. And then we'll spend, probably 20-30 minutes afterwards sharing some sources and discussing the episodes that we've watched. We will start that on April the 27th. And there will be a link for that registration that I can also drop that in the chat box for you guys today. We'll be advertising that more in the coming weeks. So again, something new that we're going to be doing here before the end of the school year. But thank you guys so much for joining us today. And we hope we see you again next month.